Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Line Change, the NHL betting podcast from the Action Network. My name is Michael Leboff. Joining me is Nick Martin. Tim is on assignment. We've got a 12-game slate looking us in the eye for Thursday, March the 14th. It's packed with, I think only it's packed with intrigue. Like there's only two games that are dead rubber matchups, featuring teams that are out of races, featuring two teams that are out of the races. That said, it was a little tricky to handicap, but we'll still do our best to set you up, and we'll still do our best to find a couple underdogs we like. I'll go first, since mine is more of a traditional underdog pick. I like Montreal. I'm going to keep going with this team uh, for this next little while. They're plus 190 at home against the Bruins. The Bruins coming minus 230, and the total here is 6. I think that Boston has shown us they've kind of shown us their hand a bit this season, especially the second half of the season, that this is a team that they could just let down against anybody. We know that their ceiling is pretty high, but we also know that they can play to a pretty low floor. And this Canadiens team has throughout this year played up pretty well in these kind of spots. Boston is 2-2 in their last four. They're 3-3 in their last six. One loss of these losses being an overtime, a well played overtime game, to give them credit against the Oilers when they lost 2-1 late. Um, that said, that you look at some of the games that they've lost. The Blues, they get crushed 5-1. They lost to the Islanders in a no show effort, and that was a part of a stretch where they were going to overtime, or part of a stretch where they kind of ended a stretch of going to overtime every game against some teams that were inferior to them, like Calgary and Seattle. I know they were on the road, but even before that, on their 7-game homestand, they found a way to lose pretty decided matchups to Seattle, to Washington, 4-1 loss to Calgary. So this team does have a propensity, especially of late, to lose these kind of matchups. So and with the way that Montreal's going, it doesn't look pretty at all that pretty, but it is better, I think, than the results show for the Habs. I know that they looked a lot better against inferior opponents on Tuesday night, but I still think that this number has some teeth to it.
Yeah, I like this one too. I thought this is a game where I definitely wouldn't really be interested in targeting Boston at like such a long number. They've played a lot of close contests. The Habs have kind of been on a bit of an upswing. I feel like you probably know where I'm going with this. I like the Habs, and I also think the tie is pretty reasonable. I thought I went for the tie on a very similar spot on Saturday in the Canadiens Leafs game. I thought it was obviously a pretty reasonable look when it's 2-2 until like 7 minutes left. I think this is gonna be the same kind of game script. We've seen Boston have a ton of games get to overtime just off the way that they like to play. They have a hard time putting teams away, and when they get on the back foot, we've been seeing teams able to knot it up late, or vice versa. If the Habs had a lead here and kind of got into a defensive shell, I'd like the Bruins' chances of tying it up. So I think right now it's at plus 380 for this game to go to overtime. I like that. And anytime, I'm saying I like that, I'd be endorsing a bet on a team that's plus 190 as a side as well. So yeah, I think that this is kind of a good matchup to target a really tight, closely contested matchup. I think the Canadiens have kind of shored up their game, and these games versus like a Boston or a Toronto are obviously a huge reason for this team to get up right now, which I think is a bit of a factor. We always see the way they compete versus Toronto. So, yeah, I like that. I think we're going to see this one be a little scrappier than the betting prices indicate.
Okay, so Habs for me. You're gonna take a look at a bet in San Jose versus Pittsburgh. The Sharks are plus 220. The Penguins minus 275. Total 6. You're not taking a side or a total here. Instead, you're looking at a prop.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Bunting to record over 2.5 shots as what will hopefully be an underdog prop. I'm looking for just even money to play it, which would be as plus 130 on Tuesday. And we have been seeing quicker adjustments to some of these bets recently. That said, I think some of the ones kind of showed, like Alex Nylander was a really popular one on Tuesday night, given his new role in Columbus. And I think this is kind of the same thing. Bigger name, obviously, but my point is just that I'm really hoping better than even money holds. Bunting's gone over this every game with Pittsburgh. His ice times, he's averaging about 18 and a half minutes playing on the Crosby line and the top power play. He's had 17 attempts in those. And I think you talk about this spot for Pittsburgh and the way that they're probably just going to lean on their top stars to finally get a win. And I think the thing with Bunting and like the amount of ice time he's getting is that they just don't really have other wingers and other lines to like hand those minutes to. The bottom six is just so bad. And I actually think that, well, maybe this is the right time for Pittsburgh to finally get right. I wouldn't bet on it. Like I don't think they blow the Sharks out of the water here. So hopefully that kind of helps the game script. And it's one of those ones. We'll see how much it moves, but I think it's going to be a good underdog bet, and I hope it comes through. And then the other note I'd say too with like a lot of these is sometimes we see like random guys go on shot heaters where like every shot attempt goes on goal or that sort of thing, or it's just kind of abnormal based off where they're playing in the lineup. I don't really think that's what's going on with Bunting right now. Like I think this is just one of those things that's going to take some time to adjust to the new role for odds makers. So yeah, I like Bunting in this game.
Yeah, I it's gonna take a lot of self-control not to bet the Sharks in this spot. The Penguins have just been, it's rough, but you know what's crazy? I might just go back to the Crosby hat trick prop again because it didn't come through obviously against the Senators, and the way that game went was the exact opposite of how we thought it would. But perhaps it's this one because I think it's coming. I think there's just going to be a monster game where he comes and comes through and everyone's like, "Oh, Sid, so heroic." All right, so Bunting over shots, 2.5 shots a goal, and Habs as our favorite underdogs. Let's go to the big board up next. We'll start with the Panthers and Hurricanes, close to a pick 'em in Carolina. Panthers are a slight underdog at even money. Canes -120. This total is 6. It looks like it'll be Spencer Martin in goal for the Carolina Hurricanes as they continue to rotate. Um, very strange situation there with essentially 4 goalies. Um, I think I'm going to be betting the Panthers here at -110 or better. Don't see too much in between these two teams. Generally, I think Florida's a tick better. I think that they're one of the teams that can handle the way Carolina wants to play, and also one of the teams I think profiles as a matchup that can get Carolina off their script, if that makes sense. Like Carolina usually just has their way with teams and is able to play the game according to the way they want to, and with Florida that becomes a little bit trickier. The goaltending disparity obviously is quite wide, so. Yeah, I think there's enough here with Florida at a pick 'em or better.
Yeah, I lean with Florida as well. The Martin thing's really weird. I had explained to you before how I'm holding Ranta and Kochikov, or shouldn't, sorry, Ranta, Anderson and Kochikov in fantasy, trying to figure out what's going to happen next week as we get into playoffs. And the reason I'm saying that's kind of relevant is why is Martin starting here? It seems really weird to me. I'm like intrigued to see if I'll get like an explanation. Like, do they actually think he could be the guy? Feels to me like they only have so many games to figure out like Anderson's status and get Kochekov rolling and kind of see what the plan for playoffs is there when it's not fully set. So it seems really weird to me. I don't really understand what's going on. Um, I think the Canes played like respectably versus New York. Obviously, the letdown part is that they just looked fairly flat offensively. I don't really think like I know that Igor supposedly saved 3.5 goals above expected. I didn't really think it was actually that high. I was giving some credit to the Rangers. I think they defended pretty well. And I look at the Panthers right now and the way that they just seem to generate on anyone. They're going to generate on Spencer Martin. I liked the under at open here, but I think the Martin news is concerning enough for me that I don't like the way that the game could potentially go. So yeah, I kind of just lean with the Panthers here. I feel like they're just the NHL's best team right now, and if you're getting them as a slight dog, you kind of just live with it. But I don't know. Not a play that I'm like super keen on one way or another, but it just feels like are you really going to fade the Panthers as an underdog right now? That seems
Yeah.
pretty bold.
I wonder if the thinking here is that they wanted to get Martin, a game or two just in case, and there's a back-to-back coming, so you'd assume that over the weekend it'd be Kochekov and Anderson, some combination, and this maybe, I don't know. I'm stretching to find a reason, but um, perhaps Rod will call in and explain. Okay. This one jumped out to me right away when I saw it on the schedule because I wanted to see where this price is, where it goes. Coyotes are +150 in Detroit. The Red Wings -180. The wheels are falling off for the Red Wings. We saw this coming. The total is 6.5. I could see this line moving pretty precipitously towards Detroit as a lot of first of all, the Coyotes aren't very good. They're depleted after the deadline. And I think this one sets up as like the classic quintessential get right spot for a team that is now in a must win spot after they choked away this a pretty chunky lead in the playoff race in the Eastern Conference. Detroit, uh we've also seen this before from them. Like if you remember early in the year, Detroit won what, seven of like their first eight or six of their first whatever it was, and we're like, yeah, it looks all right. And then the red they went into like a spin. They kind of bounced back a bit. Then it took a while, and then Alex Lyon went on that heater and has led Detroit back led led them back to like the top of the playoff picture. And now it's obviously all gone pear-shaped on them, and they've let up a ton of goals over their last six games. And I don't think it's gonna be continue to be this bad. They've let up 32 goals over their last six. That said, I think that if this line can moves the way I think it will towards Detroit, I think there's going to be a shred of value on the Coyotes and almost betting against the get right narrative here. For the Red Wings, it's now or never for them. Like you have to collect these 2 points. They have the Sabres again over the weekend as part of a back to back with the Penguins, so there is an opportunity for them to just like bounce right back into this thing. But it has to start with this win in Arizona, and I feel like people are just going to bet on the Red Wings and lay it because of that. So the Coyotes have just been so disappointing for us that it's a sickening thing to say, but I would much rather bet them than lay this number with Detroit with the way things are going.
Yeah, for me, I minus 172 looks kind of reasonable on the Wings, given like my belief that they get right. But I still want to pass. I thought the exact same thing on Friday. Detroit was opened at minus 135 in Arizona, and I took the cheese. I thought it was the get right spot. I thought, and they obviously just got demolished. So I feel like the Wings figure it out here, but it's not like I think it's like a pure value bet. It's another one of these ones I feel like it's a bit of a sucker's bet if you lose, where you're like, oh, they lost six in a row. But it is one of those things like we never thought Detroit would be this bad. When we were hating on them and saying like they're a bit of a like we're a luck box. You're never as good as you look at your absolute best when you've rolled and won seven in a row, and you're never as bad as you look at your absolute worst when you've lost six in a row the way they have, which I think is an obvious point to make, but I think it's been very true for Detroit at both ends of this. The one game note that I do think is relevant is that Joe Veleno is questionable, and he's a really good player. And Detroit, part of the problem, and I think people have really overrated the Larkin thing because they're like he's obviously their leader and he's really good. He's their best center by a mile, but you don't start losing and giving up six goals a game because one player is out in the NHL. That's not how this works. Like this isn't basketball losing like prime LeBron from a five-man rotation. You know what I mean? Like it's like this shouldn't completely make the wheels fall off and everything. So I think it's gotten a little overvalued, but I do think if you're going to couple that with Volano out, the center depth is hurting. So that's kind of one factor here. It feels like Detroit gets right here though, right? Like they're fighting at practice. You love to see
Yeah.
that sort of thing. It shows the care is still there. They want it. I think I don't know. It feels like the streak ends tomorrow night,
Right.
but is minus 172 a great betting number?
That's exactly the
Who
question.
knows?
Like
Yeah.
it's a really tricky one. It's a fun conundrum, and I think that they'll end up I think they'll end up catching being a pretty trendy favorite on Thursday night. It's the problem is like even in a get right spot against a team like Arizona, who like I said is depleted, banged up. I think Dylan Gunther's or Barrett Hayton's out again now. Does that is that gonna help like turn around a team that is just giving up so many shots and so many scoring chances against?
And they've been non-competitive. That's the thing. If
That's
they'd
yeah, that's what it
shown
is.
like,
Like
yeah,
they've lost by multiple goals in every one of these games. Every one.
yeah, I'm with you. I think the spot might be on the weekend in Pittsburgh. I think
Yeah,
because Pittsburgh's
I was
betting
gonna say if
numbers
they even
keep
if
holding up.
they lose against Arizona on Thursday, then they get the Sabres at home on Saturday. I think that could be a spot where the Sabres get too much attention, but
Yeah,
this
I was
that
laughing
Pittsburgh spot
today,
too.
Mike, when I posted that thing talking about because I looked at the comments from when we picked Detroit at the starting or the Islanders at the start of this losing streak, and I don't care. I think you'd probably know I almost like Detroit more than the Islanders as a fan, which whatever, who cares? I don't think it matters. I'm just trying to handicap the games. But I did love seeing three people bookmark my tweet today on the Wings, and I just know if they go ahead and like win these games that are coming up against the soft schedule, I'm gonna have a couple people being like, "See, look at Detroit." So if you're listening, just know that I noticed, and I'm excited to see if the Wings bounce back. You getting in my mentions.
Game of the night: Senators and Jackets. Ottawa -135 at Columbus +115. Total of 6.5. I don't even know who's going to play for Columbus at this point. It seems like everybody's out. So but I'll tell you what, I'm not going to bet the Senators as a favorite. So I've got nothing here. If you want to just move on.
I'll probably end up with some props. I'll say that. Like keep my eye out in the uh, app. I think if Alex Nylander's numbers don't move too drastically, you just have to play him. He's really ripping right now, and they're just so thin at winning. They lost potentially Chinikov last game. We'll see if Marchenko ends up coming back from illness. But for me, it's just, I mean, what can you even say about this game? I feel like it's a decent prop game, given that there's going to be some guys moving in and around the lineup. I think it could end up being one of these kind of open lottery bowls that have been working out for us, but didn't really have too much around this one as of today. I think there's a lot of game notes. And Mike, the other thing that I'll throw out there that I think we're going to get to on the Rangers, and I've said to you, is I really don't agree with anything that Pascal Vincent does. And if I was a GM this year, I would be loving to get a young Blue Jackets forward who's been misused, because I think he's made everything as tough as possible for like a developing young player this season. And I'm not surprised that Roslovic all of a sudden is looking like a pretty smart ad at the deadline.
Maple Leafs and Flyers up next. Toronto is -142 on the road. Flyers +120. Total here of 6. Philadelphia banged up on the defensive end, the defensive side of the equation with injuries, and then of course Sean Walker being traded, and pretty significant downgrade, I think, going from a blue line that had a top four with him and Cam York, Travis Sanheim, and Jamie Drysdale to one that now is we're playing Mark Stahl and Ronnie Attard and Eric Johnson, some pretty big minutes. So it's a little dicey for the Flyers on the blue line. The Maple Leafs, by the way, like injury issues of their own. Of course, their blue line is all kind of mishmashed together at this current time, and Mitch Marner could be out. So I think there's just too much here to feel confident either way. I think that the number maybe looks a tad short on the Leafs, even without Marner. But given how Philly's punched up this year, the kind of lineup conundrums, I'm happy to pass. And it's funny. I made the joke, and I don't know if I said this while we were recording or before, that Philadelphia basically has the same chance of beating every team in the league, right? Like they're just like a coin flip every game, 48, 52%. Like that's where they're and I was saying it tongue in cheek, but then you watch that game against the Sharks and you're like it's kind of true. It's just kind of true. Like they it's not that you don't know who's going to show up. Like it's not like there's like two different versions, that sports cliche of what version of the Flyers is going to show up. The thing is that the same version of the Flyers shows up every game. And it just depends on if, they get the saves, they get the and they finish off their chances, because they have so much trouble running away from teams, but they cause you so much trouble when you want to run away from them, as long as the refs don't get involved like they did against the Lightning. But um, yeah, I interesting matchup, a lot to I guess dive into, but I think I'm gonna pass.
Yeah, I was looking at this one pretty damn similar to you there. I thought that the opening, like the Leafs are -137 at the time recording. I think that's a little short. I think it probably closes like -150, but I also don't really have like an actionable take on this game. I just kind of looked at it and I was like, okay, I don't really want to bet the Leafs, but I feel like maybe they're not quite favored enough. And I think the concern for the Flyers is just that the decor right now isn't quite what it was, which is going to make things a little harder than it's been. Torts has done a good job plug and playing. I know he's not even on the bench, right? He's still out for this game.
Yeah, yeah,
I think in the
one game.
middle of the season, that essentially has very little, all the
Almost more of
systems
a
are in
positive,
place.
like it gives you a little bit more
Yeah,
billboard
like I don't think it
material.
matters in like a one off or a two off where it's just like, all right,
Yeah.
we have our ACs putting guys on the bench and that are on the ice. But Yeah, I'm kind of with you. I feel like if Flyers had like a few more of their guys in on the back end, I'd get there. But for the time being, I just don't think they're quite what they have been.
New Jersey Devils are plus 145 in Dallas. The Stars minus 175. This total at 6.5. Dallas looked like world beaters in that first period against the Panthers and then blew a 3-0 lead to lose in regulation. The Devils, what else can we say about them? I'll put it this way. I think there's probably going to be like two or three times down the stretch here where the Devils just show up and pace the team, and we're like, we should have seen it coming. But at the same time, like we're not gonna do that. Like I'm just so done with this team and trying to figure out when that spot's gonna be, and it's way, way, way too unscientific because um they just look like they're so excited for this season to end, and um can't really blame them. And now John Marino out, Siegenthaler out, so they're even more banged up. They're playing one of the best teams in the league. I mean, well, I'm done with this one. So what do you got?
I actually like the over in this game. I think this is a sneaky good over spot. I'm hoping maybe it'll even come down. I don't know if it will or not, but I still believe in the Devils' offensive stars. I think they're going to bounce back. They had some ugly miscues versus the Rangers, but I still feel like there'll be nights where they kind of get going in that front. And the Stars just continue to play like pretty up-tempo hockey, not getting great goaltending at all of their own. One of the deepest offensive cores in the league, though, which should be able to do a lot of damage versus the Devils here. So I kind of like this as a spot to break open. I like that the Devils are kind of checking out and probably will be, pretty prone to giving up their share in this game. So I kind of like this as one where we could see like a 5-3 final fairly often. I think this is a decent spot to get on the over for sure.
Ducks are a big underdog at Minnesota. Anaheim plus 230, Minnesota minus 285. This total at 6.5. I think the Wild are making a little bit of a push here. The Ducks have looked dreadful of late after they sold off some pieces at the deadline. And it's really a question of are they going to get like 37 saves a night right now? And if you think they are, go for it. I don't, so I'm just going to pass here.
Yeah, if like I get confirmation that Carlson and or Zegras are going to play in this game, which I don't know. I saw Zegras is kind of close apparently, but we'll see. I could almost get in on the Ducks, especially if maybe the numbers move. Like if you got plus 235 with those guys in, I feel like I'd just be like, all right, I'm just going to close my eyes and do it. The Wild have kind of been playing somewhat close with everyone. Like it feels like they've really been grinding to get their recent wins. I might have got a little too high on them around January and their chances of bouncing back. So we'll see. I'm kind of almost closer to the Ducks. They really have been playing without a ton of NHL talent some of these recent games. So I wonder if that might get not quite cooked into the number enough, especially when no one pays attention to Anaheim, who just got demolished by the Chicago Blackhawks. Uh, so we'll see. I don't know. And then the other thing I guess is if Eriksson Ek missed too, that would also move the needle a fair bit. So I'm closer to betting the Ducks than the Wild, but nothing at the time of recording.
Vegas and Calgary, these two are in Calgary. Vegas at the time of recording minus 135. Calgary plus 115. This total at 6.5. I think we're both on the same page here. I actually don't mind laying it with Vegas on the road. Does feel like that a scrappy win, I guess you'd call it, against the Kraken. Not something that I was overly impressed with, but I do think that this team should get better as every game comes. They're working in three major parts to their lineup with Mantha, Hannafin, and Hurdle, who obviously isn't there just yet. But I think as they kind of get more reps under them and these guys get adjusted, everyone in the team gets adjusted to new roles, and Jack Eichel gets more reps, um, you know, and gets more game time going as well. Like I think Vegas should continue to ascend. It comes down to goaltending for them and injuries, but with the way Calgary is going, I don't think that they're bettable as a just a pretty small underdog even at home.
Yeah, the thing for me with that Kraken game was that I mean everyone and their brother I think was on the Knights because it opened kind of short and it never really got that far apart. But I think a huge part of that for odds makers, if you look, the Kraken have been getting quite a bit of market respect. And I thought a lot of that game was just the Kraken playing a do or die matchup. You could see how bad they wanted it. And I really thought that they played a pretty good game. It wasn't like a pretty win by the Knights at all, but I'm not like, oh wow, they just went over like they had to go to overtime with Seattle. I think that was a lot on what the Kraken did, who just blew up Calgary last week too. So I kind of still had like some market value on the Kraken, and I liked the Knights at that price. And now I look at this and I'm like, wow, it's like it's minus 135 at the time of recording. I think the Flames are way worse than the Kraken right now. So, and like you said, another night for all these new Knights players to get acclimated to playing together and get Jack Eichel back in top form. It feels like Vegas is just going to keep getting better and better. So I'm kind of surprised that this game is open like exactly where that Kraken game was. I feel like I'm just looking at it and I'm like, are the Flames not being power rated worse than the Kraken right now? I feel like they absolutely should be. And then you look at it and like you said, all arguments are saying that the Knights should keep trending up. So yeah, I thought this price was really short. I think the Knights will obviously be the the most popular bet in this game by a mile. I don't see who's really trying to bet the Flames here. And even like that Avs game, I thought it could have got worse, right? I was like that first period when like our bet on Colorado was losing. I was like, are you kidding me? Like, how is this possible? So it feels to me a little bit. Maybe we'll be wrong. We always see these teams punch back in these spots, but it feels to me like the Flames are hitting like a wall of like this thing is over. Like our season's done. We've kind of bounced back as many times as possible. And I know you got to always count on like, professionals making what they are and playing for jobs, finding a way. But it does feel like they're kind of their last gasps have been had, and they're just now in like countdown the games mode for me with the Flames. So yeah, I thought this price was too close. I'm pretty sure we'll see it close like minus 160.
Okay, and before we get to best bets, we'll wrap with the Caps and Kraken. Washington plus 145, likely be Charlie Lindgren and goal for them as they're on the second night of a back-to-back. Seattle minus 175, demoralizing loss against one of the teams they're chasing. They did get a point, but this totals at 5.5. I think I don't know if this sounds weird, but I'm much happier to bet Washington in Edmonton as a +2 whatever they are right now dog compared to this number in Seattle on a brutal travel spot, even with the better goalie this season in goal for the Caps. Um, that said, I just don't trust that Seattle is good enough to put Washington away to get enough margin, I guess, separation to justify these odds because the Capitals just make it so tough to do that. Um, it you're Washington, you're a Capitals fan, and you're I think your fan sense is tingling that this is probably the end of the road for Washington. This road trip maybe gets away from them. I actually don't know if I see it that way. I think that they could still kind of rumble with the two teams that they're playing Wednesday and Thursday night. So um, just the number's not long enough on Washington, and considering the spot, I mean, this is not an easy back to back at all.
Yeah, the thing for me that just has me not like thinking I at least see the number and interested in the Kraken is I still think the Kraken are playing really good hockey. Like you look at every game they've had in March, they lost at home to the Oilers. I thought they played really well. They could have blown the Flames out in Calgary, 1-4-2, played solid to win in Winnipeg the next night. And then they were like they've been full value in every game where it's just been like really competitive. So that could be an argument that maybe you don't want to lay this kind of number, but I can at least see it. I think their process still looks quite sharp. So yeah, I really didn't have a lot here. And the other thing is I kind of want to see, it's always only one game, but how do the Caps look tonight in Edmonton? How does that game go? I think is pretty relevant in this spot. Um, like the thing for me too is the Caps, they were scrappy versus some good underdogs in February, but this stretch of improved play has come against an extremely soft schedule. So I'm kind of trying to weigh like where they're really at. So it just feels like one where there's a lot of moving parts for me heading into this game, but I wouldn't be shocked if I ended up just thinking, all right, let's just do it with Seattle.
Okay. On to best bets now. We'll start with yours. A pick 'em between the Islanders and Sabres in Buffalo. The Sabres are making a little bit of a surge. I do think it could be a bit of fool's gold with what we've seen from them, and they do have a lot more work to do. But hey, with the way Detroit's going and the fact that we're not all that confident in Philadelphia, Tampa Bay, or even the Islanders at this point, who knows? Total is 6, so this is essentially a playoff game for both teams. I think it plays out that way. You look at the defensive numbers for the Islanders have been astonishing considering where they were uh, pre-Patrick Waugh, and now that since he's taken over, according to Natural Stat Trick, like they are number one in the NHL in expected goals against. They're number one in expected high danger chances against at 5-on-5. It's just been a remarkable turnaround. Um, they're not generating a ton of chances at 5-on-5, but they just haven't really needed to. But the Sabres play the same way, and I think that's leading into where you're going.
Yeah, I like the under here. You set the stage for me pretty well. I think that this, given the spot too, I like the spot in terms of like where both teams are at and needing this game and hopefully somewhat of a playoff atmosphere as the Sabres put this last gasp together. The Islanders still have Sorokin in the net, still have full faith in him. I know you do as well. And that as he gets behind what has been a much cleaner defensive game, he's going to keep playing well. And then the Sabres right now, we've seen some of these offensive explosions, but I think a lot of it has been the teams that they're playing. I think when you talk about like this playoff type matchup versus an Islanders team that now really isn't giving up anything, I still think 6 even looks too high. So right now, under 6 is at -110. I hope that holds. I would do 6 to -120 and then call it there. So we'll see. This was another one. These openers were just terrible, which is also, it's almost particularly annoying to record the pod because it's like how far off what you think is actually the right number did you open the game? Or like, did you open it with any clue about what you were doing? But yeah, I think the under in this game is a good bet.
I also do wonder if the Islanders are getting a little bit disrespect, or maybe the Sabres are getting a little bit too much respect because there's a lot being made about this push here. But if you look at it, it's a 2-game winning streak, and I know one of the wins was against Edmonton. But before that, they had lost 3 in a row, one in overtime to Winnipeg, Toronto, and Nashville. If you want to extend back to, the beginning of or the middle of February, when I guess they've started to round into some sort of form, like they're 7-3-1 in that span with uh, a +7 goal differential. The wins have come against Columbus, Montreal, one in overtime against the Lightning, shootout win against the Hurricanes. So like there are some good ones in there. They beat up that Golden Knights team that was incredibly banged up at the time. It almost looks like a small sample of what we've seen a lot from with the Sabres this season. That they can kind of show you some shred of decent play, and then they'll just get walloped and come back down to earth. Like there's some ugly results even pretty recently. A loss to the Ducks, um and it what and maybe I am an Islander fan, so I'll obviously admit that. But what is going on under Watt does seem pretty sustainable. It's not. I don't think that we're seeing some sort of dopamine hit from the new coach. It's just looks like they're playing a much better defensive style, and they've just been flat out 5 tiers better than the team they were. But I think that maybe Buffalo's catching a little bit too much respect. I think the Islanders should be a slight favorite here with the goaltending. I know UPL's been really good, um, but I think the more I think about it, the more I think that the Islanders might be a little underrated. I'm not going to bet it because I'll obviously be heavily invested in it as a fan. Okay, I'll do something a little different. I think this will be my first time making this team my best bet. That's the New York Rangers and a pick 'em right now against the Lightning. I think the Rangers should be favored even on the road. I think I'd play this one up to -125. Uh, if you look at these two teams, you can make a pretty salient argument that the Lightning are just a poor man's version of the Rangers. They're two teams that aren't great at 5-on-5, but they will rely on special teams. They'll rely on their world-beating superstars to make up the difference. They're both the type of teams where you could go into a game and you can just absolutely tilt the ice and outshoot them 35-20 at 5-on-5, but they can go 2 for 6 on the power play, and that could be the difference in the game, right? They can win 4-2 because they went 2 for 5 on a power play and you guys didn't, and they got the big saves. There is the market difference here, of course, is that Shesterkin is in otherworldly form. Jonathan Quick's been really good, even if it's a surprise start for him, which I don't think it will be. And Vasilevsky has still kind of been inconsistent since uh his his arrival this season after that long break. I will note that I think that what Tampa did at the trade deadline, the more and more I think about it, the more and more it grows on me because our biggest complaint with the and the reason we were skeptical of this team was a lack of depth. Anthony Duclair and Matt Dumba kind of slot into perfect roles for what they are. So I do think Tampa maybe should be slightly upgraded in terms of just power ratings and on a long-term outlook. But I do think that this number looks pretty short on the Rangers, and maybe it's the betting market accounting for a tough schedule spot with the the look ahead to the Panthers, or like they have a big game on the weekend, excuse me, against the Penguins and on national TV, and coming off that win against the Carolina Hurricanes and what was a massive, massive contest in terms of the division race. So I like the Rangers here.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think even comparing these teams is a little unfair. The Rangers have a decor that's like almost 1 through 6 better at this
Yeah.
point. So yeah, I don't love the spot, but it does just feel like one of these ones where it's like you're not going to make the Rangers a slight favorite right now. That seems a little absurd. And they really have this week played like that Carolina game. They're really quite strong, I thought. Whether you want to say maybe they didn't own that much of the puck overall, I thought that they actually played a pretty strong defensive game. So I kind of lean with the Rangers. I'm also with you on I like what Tampa did at the deadline, while I also think that Duclair and Dumba have both been pretty much trash this entire season because it's two guys that you get to bring in for a very cheap cost on a team that's really not that good. And it might be able to work out. It might work out. They both have some upside. Maybe Dumba, like I thought he would bounce back this year on the Coyotes, but it's also pretty concerning that he was on a show me contract and he didn't show anything. So like I like I don't think you can just say the motivation wasn't there. He was on the Coyotes. Like he
Yeah.
was like their worst defense or defender, and he was playing for a contract. So we'll see what he has left in the tank. He wasn't very good last year. But with that said, yeah, I think it's a decent guy to try to buy on if you're Tampa. And then same thing for Anthony Duclair. Everyone knows he's got a really good skill set, just has a hard time finding much consistency. So I think it was kind of one of those things. It was like a decent way to attack a deadline where you're like not in the equation and you don't have many assets. But we'll see how it works out because I think they're definitely both big question marks right now.
Yeah, but I just think that they're being asked to do like the most appropriate thing of their where they are
Well, I mean,
currently.
Dumba's on the third pairing
Yeah,
right now.
exactly.
That's how he
It's
skated. So
yep,
we'll see.
yep. I think it's perfect for both those guys. Like you put Duclair on that second line along with like Sorelli and Stamkos. It gives it a little bit more upside. It pushes Connor Sheary or Jano when he comes back down to more appropriate roles for them. So that's it, like the Rangers. So that does it for us for this week. 12 game slate to look at for Thursday. Done and dusted. The best bets came in on the under 6 in Islanders Sabres for you. I like the Rangers at anything better than minus 125 against the Lightning. The underdog plays. You like Michael Bunting to go over 2.5 shots on goal and Penguins and shots at even money or better. And I took the Montreal Canadiens as a plus 190 underdog in Boston. For Nick and the on assignment Tim, I'm Michael. Thank you for listening to Line Change. If you haven't, please rate, review, subscribe. Thank you to our producer Noah, and we will see you next week.